Hey, Sarah. Sarah, can you hear me? Hey, Pinyon. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, I'm just going to enable the chat.
Hey, Kellyanne, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Sarah.
Hey, how's it going?
Very well, yourself?
Well, it's beautiful and sunny out,
It is.
so that makes me happy.
Certainly is.
Are you in Boston?
Yes. Yourself?
I am as well, yeah.
I'm just getting Anna's computer set up so I can see what's happening on everyone else's screens. We just ended, Nisha's joining in a moment. We just ended the morning webinar. And then we have another one after this.
Another one? Oh my goodness.
You guys have been busy.
We have, I'm sure you have been too, Pinyon.
Hi, Vincent.
Pinyon. Pinyon?
Panyon.
Say it one more time.
Panyon.
Panyon. Right?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Of course.
Kellyanne, what are you up to, or what do you do?
I'm a teacher at a school in Dorchester. So it's the Boston Public Schools. We've been off now for 3 weeks or 4 weeks. I don't even remember. It feels like days are just like sliding into one to another. Just trying to do the best of the situation.
Yeah, what school are you at in Dorchester?
It's called Boston International, and it's all international students, newcomers from Cape Verde, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Haiti. So 100% of our population is from another country. And they've been here anywhere from 2 weeks to 3-4 years.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And as a former immigrant myself, it definitely connects in a more personal level than most jobs would, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Can you guys hear me okay? I couldn't, I'm trying on a laptop and I couldn't connect the microphone, so it's picking up the sound from the built-in mic.
You sound great.
Yeah.
And we are tinkering together, so we don't need to sound perfect as long as people can hear us. And we do have one attendee so far, so we're going to start around 1 o'clock, and everyone should be rolling in soon. So welcome. We're excited you're here. Oh, can people hear mine? We're good now.
That might be you.
That's me. All right. That better?
Yes.
Okay. Wayne is here.
Hi. I'm actually finishing up another webinar here, so I'll be on in a second.
So the heart and soul of the Tinkercad product team is joining us, but I think they have another webinar that they're doing right now. We're all webinaring it together.
Yeah.
Oh, and so for those of you who are joining as attendees, we're going to get started in about 5 minutes. Welcome. We're so excited that you're here. And in terms of camera, people who are panelists, and Sue just joined us, people who are panelists, their cameras are shown, but your camera isn't shown right now if you're an attendee. Later on in the webinar, we want this to be an actual feel like a round table. So we want to open up the mic for people who want to join in on the conversation live. So you will be able to speak, so make like voice comments later, but we're the only ones that will be on camera. So don't worry if you think you're going to be on camera, you won't be. Sarah, Pignon, and Sue can worry. But your backgrounds look beautiful.
I wanted to do one of those cool Zoom backgrounds, but my I think my computer doesn't have the right software.
I like the real backgrounds, but that's just my opinion. My friend did a Zoom background, but didn't realize that you had to have like a white wall. I think you have to have like a white wall or something behind you, and her whole face turned into a constellation, which was so cool. But I had to do like an hour and a half. We were planning something, so we did an 1.5-hour call in which she was like constellation face. I've been calling her lately too.
A green screen would work best. And Sarah, there's so much contrast and detail in the background for you that the computer has a really hard time figuring out where it's you and where's the rest of the background. So that's why the software probably doesn't pick up as well. But yeah, try the green screen if you have one. I heard the Queen of England, when she was speaking, she was wearing a green dress. And it was a green background, so like everything that, like basically her body became part of like the background.
Floating head would be a nice
That's what it was.
option too.
Cool. Who did that happen to?
I think it was the Queen. She gave a speech about the COVID-19, and apparently she was wearing a green dress.
Yeah. Okay. Note to self.
So even the Queen is tinkering together with us. Again, those of you who are joining, we're going to start in a couple of minutes, but just to let you know how this is going to work. So we are tinkering together. This is a virtual roundtable. Your video will not be shown at any point during this webinar unless you are one of the panelists. However, later on, you will be able to share your voice with the larger group. I can enable your microphone, so if you want to make a voice comment, you can later on. And also the chat should be enabled right now. There's our chat DJ, Netia.
Hello, sorry, I had to clean up the kitchen from the last webinar. Hold on.
So Netia is going to be DJing the chat. So, and I will be later on. I'm going to explain to you once we get started how those of you who are attendees will be able to participate fully. There's Wayne. Hey, Wayne. There's Nutrisse. See Nutrisse?
Muted still.
I feel like romper room. It's like I see Nutrisse and I see Wayne. So again, we're going to get started in a few minutes. What did you say, Wayne?
I used to work with Miss Sally from Romper Room when I made toys.
That's some major street cred, Wayne. So Sue's already getting shout outs. There's Christian.
Hi. Is the Tinkercad logo the right way?
Yep, looks perfect.
For me. All right.
We were just talking, Christian, about the Zoom background and best practices. You seem to have figured it out very well.
Yeah. I figured this one's appropriate for today.
It's very awesome. So for those of you who are just joining us, the way that this webinar is going to run, and we're going to get officially started in a couple minutes. I'm just going to let people get situated and get started. But throughout the webinar today, the chat should be enabled, and it looks like it's enabled. Nisha, who, if you're using the gallery view in the upper right-hand corner of your Zoom screen, for me right now, Nisha's in the middle. I don't know if that's the same for everyone. We're almost a complete Brady Bunch. We need one more person. So we'll wait till we get our Brady Bunch together. But in the meantime, Netia is the chat DJ. She's going to be looking at the chat throughout, so you can even start chatting now. Netia's job is to make sure that if you're someone who's more comfortable participating just via typing through chat, Netia will bring your voice into the larger conversation. I will be handling the question and answer. So the way that we're going to run this is we'll briefly introduce ourselves. We'll talk a little bit just to kind of get the conversation started. But from there, later on, you'll be able to ask questions to the Tinkercad team and also our illustrious panel that is assembling right now. And you will do that by actually, if you hover over the bottom of your screen, you'll see an icon that looks like a raised hand. You're going to hit the raised hand icon so I know that you're someone who wants to actually speak out loud. And what you're going to do is not in the chat, but in the question and answer, you're going to type, just like, you don't have to say everything that you plan to say, but just to give us a sense so we can introduce you. So, you know, if you have a question or comment and just kind of what the nature of it is, and I can unmute you. I have the power. So we're just going to give it a couple more minutes so that everyone can join us who is joining, maybe like a minute or so. In the meantime, we're so happy that you're here. So welcome.
I feel like I should know where this is, but where is the raised hand?
So if you hover over, so you might have a different view than the attendees, but if you hover over the bottom of your screen, there's three icons. One is chat. It looks like a comic voice bubble. One is a raised hand, and you can hit that, and then the other one is question and answer. So I'm going to explain one more time. I'm sorry, Sue.
I don't have a raised hand that I can see.
So your view is different, Sue, than the attendees. So the attendees see something different because you're logged in as a panelist.
Okay. I'll just wave.
Yes, wave. All right, so we have quite a few attendees right now. So I'm going to get started by introducing myself and introducing the topic. So my name is Kellyanne Mahoney. I am a youth program specialist at Autodesk. I'm also a former Boston Public Schools teacher and Boston Public Schools graduate as well. I taught in the Boston Public Schools for 13 years, and I'm also a parent of a child in the Cambridge Public Schools in Massachusetts. Welcome. This is our Tinker Together virtual roundtable. The purpose of this discussion today is just to kind of stay connected and to talk about our experiences over the past few kind of weird, crazy, sad weeks, and just to kind of talk about how we're tinkering together in order to bring learning to children, either as our roles as parents or as our roles as educators, and many of us have hybrid roles as well, as do I. How we're going to run this is I'm going to briefly introduce all of the panelists that you should see via video. Just as a tip, if you are new to Zoom, if you click on the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you should see a grid that kind of looks like the Tinkercad logo. If you click on it, you'll be able to see everyone's faces at once, unless you want to see close-ups of our face, and if that's that's your preference, great. But I like to be able to see everyone's faces as we're talking. We're almost a perfect Brady Bunch, but it's okay. We're going to get started. Guillermo from the project team, the Tinkercad product team, is also going to be joining us potentially, but right now we are pretty well represented with the Tinkercad team. So how you can participate if you're a participant throughout the webinar today, Netia is going to be the chat DJ, and she's going to be monitoring the chat to make sure that those who are who want to talk throughout the presentation are able to do so, or the panel are able to do so. And I'm going to be monitoring the question and answer. So how this is going to run is I'm going to briefly introduce everyone, and then each person who's on the panel to kind of ignite our conversation on this topic will be talking about how they've been tinkering together in educating our children, and then And then from there, we'll open it up. So if you do want to inject your voice into the conversation, how you're going to do that again is in the middle. If you hover over the bottom of your screen, you'll see an icon that looks like a hand. You're going to hit the hand to let me know that you want to actually speak out loud. And then in the question and answer, not the chat, you're just going to say to me the nature of whether you have a question for the Tinkercad team about Tinkercad specifically, or something that someone has said in the conversation has sparked your interest that you want to comment about. So we shall begin. So I will begin introducing everyone really quickly, and then from there we'll go around and just talk a little bit more in introducing ourselves. So I am so grateful today. We have an illustrious panel of educators, parents, people who are doing both at the same time in the Tinkercad team. We have 2 doctors. Correct me if there's more than one doctor on the panel today. But I'm going to begin by introducing Dr. Sarah Cherry Rice, who is the executive director and founder of Digital Ready, which is an awesome design studio and many other things in Boston that is meant to be a bridge between the Boston Public Schools and the exciting innovation and digital economy in Boston. We also have Mr. Panelist Guests, who is a teacher from the Boston International Newcomers Academy in Boston, which is a school that's specifically directed at students who are new immigrants to the United States, who maybe have access to the academic curriculum but are learning English at the same time that they are learning academic content. Mr. Tassi is also the winner of our first Make It Real contest as well. He won a makerspace at his school, and he's a computer science teacher. We have Wayne Losey, who is one of the product managers at Tinkercad. I feel very supported by the Tinkercad product team right now. He particularly works in Tinkercad code blocks. He's kind of the brainchild and creative force behind that, but he also does many other things for Tinkercad. We also have Christian Premuk. Did I pronounce it correctly? So Christian Premuk. I was realizing people that we work with, we might not necessarily know how to pronounce their last names. And Christian is also part of the Tinkercad product team. He's a product manager for Tinkercad, and he does a lot to make sure that the Tinkercad community is happy and feels that they are being well served by Tinkercad. We have Netia McCray, who is our chat DJ. She is an MIT alumna, engineer, maker educator. I'm going too long with my introductions, but you guys are so awesome. And she's been actually running awesome programming for kids for Autodesk for the past 2 weeks that my daughter has actually been taking part in as well, and also students throughout the world. So it has been wonderful to work with her on this. Dr. Nutrisse Gaskins is also joining us. I feel like I could talk about Nutrisse forever, but I won't. But she is also a maker educator, artist in residence, builder in residence at the Autodesk Technology Centers, assistant director of Lesley University's STEAM Learning Lab, and just, I could go on forever to talk about her, but I'm gonna let her talk about herself. And then also Sue Cusack, so part of the Dream Team, and the Director of Educational Technology at Lesley University, and also works together with Nutrisse as the Director of the Lesley STEAM. And she also works really closely with the Boston Public Schools, Somerville Public Schools, Cambridge Public Schools. So we have a wealth of resources here to draw from and stories. So why don't we get started actually from a teacher perspective? Mr. Tassi, do you want to talk for just a couple of minutes about your experiences thus far?
Sure. I was actually just typing a little bit about my experiences with Tinkercad, but first off, I'm really humbled to be here in the presence of so many amazing people like Sue and Netia and Wayne, which I just met, and you guys are awesome. Tinkercad is really like a really awesome platform, and I'm really not saying this because I'm here, but I am fortunate enough to speak of my experiences with this awesome platform with my students. So as I was trying to say earlier a little bit, I find Tinkercad is really easy to use and also allows a lot of flexibility in terms of what it can achieve and what it can do. And I generally start like very simple. Like I started this year with taking the Lego blocks from my 4-year-old son, and on day one, even like, before we started talking about routines and stuff, just design something. Those are icebreaker, welcome back, and they designed something with their Lego blocks. And basically the next day I said, let's design the same thing that you had on your Lego blocks into Tinkercad, where they took those blocks and again just like started really simple, by just like trying to mimic whatever they've done with the Lego blocks into their design. So I found this to be a very easy platform that can really scale up to an incredible level. I don't think that really answers your question. I wasn't really listening as much as I was typing, but you're muted.
We're tinkering together, Mr. Tassi, so it's okay. One of the things that we were also wondering about, just from a classroom teacher perspective, how your experience has been thus far. I know personally a little bit, but it would be cool to hear an update as well about how things are going.
Yeah, it's challenging. It's very different. I try to run a classroom where the focus is not so much on grades, but more on the student growth. And that's a lot easier when you're actually working with students and can give them feedback, and they can work with each other and kind of see the conversations that they can have with each other and the designs that they built. But out of everything that I've found so far, maybe there's one other organization that really has done as much to really provide a platform for the students, has been Tinkercad, because it really allows that flexibility and that ability for students to kind of like grow as much as they need to. I kind of equate Tinkercad to a gateway drug or a gateway app to designing and creativity. And what I mean by that is that students are already practicing designing skills through games like Minecraft and PUBG. It's incredible. They already have this skill set. But I think where it comes to Tinkercad is that Tinkercad really validates the importance of the skills, and that they're doing something beyond something that just like playing a game. It converts it into a game, into something that is real. And again, the tools are so easy to just pick up. And I mentioned the Legos because like it's really easy to just like pick it up, and then there is so much room for growth and trying different things that it's really incredible.
Thank you, Mr. Tassi. And I'm going to move next to Sue. Sue does a lot of work, particularly to support maker educators and those who aspire to be amazing maker educators. I'm very curious, actually, in terms of the teachers that you're working with that are used to doing really hands-on things with their students. What has their experience been in trying to make this transition to virtual learning?
So thank you for asking that question. There's a lot of palatable stress that you can feel in the field. Some people are way more prepared to make this move to a virtual space. I'm extraordinarily grateful that I'm in my comfort space talking about online learning, but many, many educators are completely unprepared to go there. And it's a really big ask to have them think beyond the curriculum that they have written and deliver it in a different way. You can't just take a classroom environment and expect that it'll be a one-to-one transfer to an online space. So schools have responded, I think, to this by for a variety of reasons, but they're asking that no new content be delivered. That simultaneously, for people who are more comfortable in the virtual space, are a little frustrated because they don't want to do review work and don't feel supported in doing something new. But in our conversations with educators recently, we've been trying to have them be a little bit more excited about this as an opportunity, instead of doing review work, to think about it and giving their students an opportunity to apply what they know in different ways. And there's a language specialist, Isabel Beck, who talks about vocabulary development and says, if you don't know a word in 8 different ways, if you can't use it in 8 different ways, then you actually don't really know that word. And so this, I think the opportunity of giving people, kids, the opportunity to engage in learning in different ways, wrapping it around things that they're familiar with. So through their homes, looking out their windows, just trying different ways to apply what they know, is a more creative endeavor for some educators. And it's my hope that with a little bit more practice with that, that we'll start seeing some of those practices actually come back into school when they are able to go face to face. Some people who are more comfortable with this have noticed that structure really helps. So they don't have to be real time with kids all the time, but they have a structure to set expectation with their students on what is happening when, what the global focus is. So those kind of strategies are also really helping. But we find that there's a real need to be out there to be a good shoulder partner for educators, if they can have the bandwidth to slow down long enough to have that conversation to be supported, because people are quite literally dancing as fast as they can. Parents too. You're seeing a lot of public conversation about schooling being a kind of a global failure at this moment, because it's such a burden for families, real challenging for kids, and tough on teachers. So it is a scramble.
Yeah, I can second that. My kids, Finn and Rose, in 1st and 2nd grade, they were in the same classroom, in the actual classroom, and they split teachers. And that structure was easy when you're actually in class and the teacher can tell you to go here. And now we're trying to do this all digitally, and one teacher's a little bit different, has a different skill level. One's using a different technology. One's on Google Classroom, one is not. And it's been frustrating because we started this week and we're still trying to figure it all out. And, I offer some technical advice where I can, but I can imagine it's very frustrating for parents who are trying to navigate this for their children, and the teachers who are trying to, they're wonderful teachers. They've been doing this for 30 years, but this is a whole new paradigm for them. So
It is. It's a big lift for everybody.
Christian, you mentioned technology, and sorry, Kellyanne, if I may continue, or
I say what say what's on your mind.
Christian, you mentioned like technology, and I'm sure your kids have resources. Like there's so many kids that just don't have the technology and the resources to actually even connect. Like our students, we had maybe 8 to 12% of students who had a computer at home. Now, a computer, that does not necessarily mean internet. So on the last day, before we even knew the school was canceled, we actually took all the Chromebooks out and signed them out to every single student. And we've been driving and pushing computers and networking hotspots to students wherever we can. And we're getting very close to it. But again, it's been 4 weeks of very, very hard, pushing to make sure that every single student has a computer. And sometimes, like you mentioned, you have 2 kids. Sometimes you have 2 kids, 3 kids, and the parents all have to use the same device. And it becomes far challenging than that.
Yeah, and even just the shared spaces as well. I know in the Boston public schools in particularly, there's a lot of, extended family in the same space. Even now, I had to mute myself earlier because my husband thought that he'd be a good doobie and vacuum the back porch. So if you heard vacuum noises, that was him. Wayne, did you want to chime in just a little bit, just about maybe even some of the resources like Tinker at Home that are available to teachers, or just kind of your experiences thus far?
So I work on the in-product learning stuff, which is a lot of our lessons, and we have some new stuff that we're working on for next school year. So Tinkercad does have a bunch of lessons, starters, onboarding activities that you can use in Tinkercad. You can find them at Tinkercad.com. In the top corner, it says Learn. And when you click into Learn, even if you don't have a Tinkercad account and you're logged in or not logged in, you can dig down in there and get some examples of some of the lessons that we have. A lot of the lessons, they span pretty broadly. Some are just learn the tool, Some of them are more guided activities that are sort of a how-to, like, design yourself as a superhero. So a lot of these are guided, but also open-ended. And a lot of those are taken inside the tool. We also have a bunch of learning resources, lesson plans listed in Instructables.com under the Autodesk. Actually, I think it's under Tinkercad Learning now there. Some of those, some of our in-app lessons can also be taken in Instructables. So if you wanted a child to take them in a tab side by side with Tinkercad, you can do that as well. As far as how it's been for me at home, I think it's probably been like a lot of people. I have a 10 and 14-year-old. My daughter is in public school, and maybe it was a little rockier for her because some of the teachers weren't quite as prepared. The technology classroom is someplace that they go. It's not integrated in their classroom on a day-to-day basis. We did have some similar issues for resourcing the children. I noticed 2 weeks into our lockdown, our stay-at-home, that San Francisco Public Schools did open up free devices for people who needed them. So they pulled all their Chromebooks and resourced them and assigned them out to families to help in that time. That's great. I'm not sure where it stands with networking because the Wi-Fi is just as big or even a bigger issue than the device. So, but I was really encouraged to see that generally a month into this, I would say that a lot of my daughter's teachers have adapted. We probably filled in a little bit more. It's helpful that I work on Tinkercad for that reason. But what it also did is it inspired us to start understanding, think a little bit more about some of the limitations that we might have by trying to use resources at home, and teachers trying to build resource pools for their classrooms. So one of the first things that we did on Tinkercad was we started working on a new part set that mimics some of the stuff that people might have laying around the house. So we introduced a making at home part collection recently that has like milk containers, chopsticks, popsicle sticks, all kinds of stuff that you can use to sort of mimic real world building. It's not a comprehensive list by any means yet, but it is things that probably a fair amount of families have around the house. The idea is that we would actually build that out in the future to have more like paper clips and yogurt containers and all kinds of other stuff that could be either used to teach at home or with classrooms. And the real emphasis of that is just giving them some sort of a digital mimic of hands-on building, but giving them the actual control to do things digitally that they can use for prototyping structures and things. So I'm encouraged about where things are going. I think a lot of us have a lot of adapting to do along that way.
Thank you, Wayne. My daughter especially has been enjoying the Tinker at Home parts collection as well, so thank you for that. Before we move to Nutrisse and to Sarah, I can see from the expressions on Nisha's face that there are some interesting things going on in the chat. So Nisha, could you just chime in if there's anything going on in the chat that you wanted to address to the larger group?
So there's a lot of comments. So you see me sometimes doing like the little finger spider web thing in front of the camera. So a couple of questions was just about resources for teachers, which I'm going to echo Wayne, Penyon, all of you guys' suggestions that if you go to instructables.com/teachers, you'll actually find variable guides broken down by grade level for you to actually see at-home projects that students can actually make, as well as some step-by-step guides and using Tinkercad, etc. In addition to jump on Wayne's point, if you're actually in the Tinkercad software, something I've done a dozen times when I especially have to teach large classrooms, or I have students who need a little bit more time, is that there are actual tutorials in Tinkercad. So if you have your students go into tinkercad.com, on the upper right-hand corner, you'll see Learn, and there'll be a bunch of projects categorized by grade level and what skill level that actual kid or student would like them to learn is actually broken down. I see a couple of comments saying, is there an organized way and not a random way to look at these resources? So that is a more organized way that you can do. And I will also say another one of the questions that keeps coming up is, how do you balance the actual ability? Because I know I'm like the private stalker before I jumped on here, but everyone here has done some kind of mix of hands-on learning and digital learning. And a lot of the questions seem to be geared around, how do you actually try to bring hands-on learning when you don't know what's happening on the other side of the computer screen? So I'll give a personal anecdote to provide a little bit more context for everyone. So the past 2 weeks, we've been doing these live webinars on Zoom called Tinker Together, and which we give a materials list to begin with, and students actually build with us, which leads to some funny technical issues, just to say, and trying to figure out, like, okay, if you don't have chopsticks, use toothpicks. If you don't have toothpicks, use coffee grinds or something like that that you have available in your home. When teachers aren't able to realize if the student has regular internet access, if they have access to a computer that can be relied on, how can you make sure you maintain that connection, but also that building energy or maker energy on the other side? That was a really good question someone asked. So anyone wants to chime in after we hear from Dr. Gaskins and Sarah and everyone else, that's just keep in mind, just keep in mind.
Thank you, Nisha. Also, I just wanted to, I failed to mention that Nisha is the founder and executive director of Mbadika, which is spelled M-B-A-D-I-K-A. So next, so I also just wanted—
I was wondering how to pronounce that.
Yeah, my bad. I'm gonna say, since this is all adults here, I like to always say I was about my Google search results when we first started, and I was like, yeah, Mbadika, no one's gonna have problems with that. Look at all the hard company names we've learned to pronounce. This year's our 10-year anniversary, and I cannot say I was more wrong about that idea, but it's too late now. I just like to say we're MLab, Mbadika Laboratory. If you can't say Mbadika, no worries.
Just a funny thing that happened, if you're looking for Mbadika on Twitter, Nisha was very excited about the 10th anniversary of her organization, so she changed the birth date on Twitter, and now her account is down. So
yes,
look for her soon. So next, I just also wanted to say Vincent Vincent has shared that he wants to ask a question out loud, and I just want to say thank you, Vincent, also for— he raised his hand and then also just told me the nature of his question. So in a little bit, after we hear from Dr. Gaskins and Dr. Cherry Rice, we will hear Vincent's question as well. So thank you again. So Vincent raised his hand and then also just let me know he has a Tinkercad question, by the way, that he's going to ask later by speaking out loud. So Nisha was just talking about channeling that maker energy. There's no one that I can think of who is a source of maker energy more than Dr. Gaskins. So do you want to, Dr. Gaskins, talk just for a little bit about what you've been up to? I'm curious, and how you've been tinkering together in support of students.
So I've been making a bunch of Instructables, some of them published, some not, but my currently I'm at Lesley University. We're working on some how to get content and that's helpful for families out into the community. And so how to do that in a way that's kind of supports making, but also supports them getting some or reviewing some skills that they may or may not have had a chance to do since they've been home. One of the activities, and it's something that, so one of the activities is a 3D Tic-Tac-Toe that's a remix of a previous Instructable. And it is, in order to do the 3D Tic-Tac-Toe, you can use Tinkercad to create the prototypes, create the actual, think about how you're gonna make this game board, and then actually make it out of cardboard, different parts you may have around home to make the game board. But in addition to that, I tend to make most of my content, in fact, maybe all of it, culturally relevant. So there's some sort of front loading of culture or identity, issues around equity, all that kind of representation. So for both lessons, I looked at artists, for example. There's a scientist story quilt lesson that looking at artists who make quilts as art, and then just a list of scientists that I know of that are very diverse. So Native American scientists, Asian, African American, Latino, and just really just kind of an introduction to the folks who we often don't hear about, but who are actually scientists and represent, kind of address the stereotype about who can be a scientist, as well as address who can be a maker. So the lessons are very catered towards particularly students who may not see themselves as makers or as scientists or as folks like that. So really just front loading that before they actually make anything. And so there's different ways to do that, different techniques that I use. Sometimes it's mapping, concept mapping. In this case, it may be, a little research at the beginning, but it's really important, I think, for students to say, okay, look, that person's doing it. So, that's familiar to me, or that project's familiar to me. I think I can do it. So that's really been a real focus of my work. And then just being in spaces like Autodesk, where Kellyanne tends to bring students all to disturb me when I'm working there as a resident, so that they can ask questions and see what's happening. And we've, I'm thinking about Samantha was her name, was a group of students that came through from Lynn, Massachusetts. And one of them really wanted to know how it was to be in Autodesk as a resident, kind of around all these big machines, and how I could feel comfortable being there as a Black woman. And her project was a 3D model. I think she used, she didn't use Tinkercad, she used Inventor.
Yeah, it was Inventor.
And her team, they re-engineered a ballpoint pen. And so one of my responses to her was, my first 3D model was a ballpoint pen in 1988. So when I was about her age. So when it gave it's been around for a long time, 3D modeling, I was able to explain to her, we were doing wireframes, we had to render, the render could take hours. Sometimes we had to sleep over on the floor overnight. Sometimes the render didn't take, so we had to do it again for another 6 hours. But now, something that she can take, it wasn't online, there was no online, it was done on a computer, usually an expensive one. But it really kind of helped her understand she could be something she was interested in, that the student could be in that world if she really wanted to. So I don't know. So I can answer questions about Tinkercad. I can answer questions about, applying it.
We need the Nutrisse Gaskins ballpoint pen in the Tinker at Home collection, I think.
I was literally trying to just verbatim make, I think it was a big pen, whatever pen, some everyday object. It was I think it was my first assignment in that class.
Nutrisse also makes amazing algorithmic art. So she collaborates with algorithms in order to make these beautiful images and paintings that she has been showcasing on Second Life as well, a virtual.
Which is a perfect example. So Second Life is a virtual world. I taught in Second Life. I actually ran a class in Second Life for an entire semester, and I did a hybrid class where half of the time, or most of the time, was in the classroom. And then sometimes when I was traveling, we would meet in Second Life and critique artwork in Second Life. One of the things I realized is students would come in the mornings, and it was really hard to get them to talk during critiques. But in Second Life, in the mornings, they talked a lot and they couldn't shut up. So I realized that there was some kind of thing happening. And when I came back to the classroom and they didn't want to talk, I brought up the fact that we went long with the critique in Second Life. And so that is a platform that some professors and some teachers are using, but there's an important part that links to Tinkercad, and that was noticed by a middle school student that I got on Zoom with a couple of nights ago from Long Beach, California. And when you go into build tools in Second Life, she said that looks like Tinkercad. So she saw that she made the connection between the build tools in Second Life to make things and Tinkercad, which she used at some point, I think robotics or something like that. But once you learn the skill, you just apply it. So Tinkercad's a great entry point for a lot of students.
Thank you, Nutrisse. And it just like makes me think about, you know, not to be blithe about the current situation, but just the constraints that the current situation is putting upon us as parents, as educators, and just how people who've been able to really show so much creativity within those constraints are really some of what makes me feel hopeful about the future and moving forward. So thank you, Dr. Gaskins. Before we get to Dr. Cherry Rice, and you guys are probably laughing that I'm calling you Dr. Doctor, but it's okay. It's an honor. Nisha, is there anything in the chat DJ section that we might want to bring into the larger conversation?
Not yet. I'm just privately answering some general questions about resources, etc. Go ahead and spill that knowledge in the chat. So ready for another doctor.
All right. Well, I'm going to actually, before we get to Dr. Cherry Rice, I just want to allow Vincent to talk so people can get a sense of what it's like if you're sharing your voice with a larger group. He has a Tinkercad question, and then we will move on to Dr. Cherry Rice. So Vincent has a question about Tinkercad. We definitely have lots of resources to answer that question. So Vincent, take it away. You're unmuted.
All right, thank you very much. First of all, thanks for a wonderful product. I'm located in St. Catharines, Ontario, which is about 10 or 15 minutes from Niagara Falls, for those who are curious. So there's been a lot of, I guess, attention or focus on the Sustainable Development Goals by the UN, and other community like the Microbit and other platforms are aligning some projects or providing some challenges, projects, whatnot, aligned with their platform. I'm just wondering if Tinkercad is moving in that direction too. Like, is there a Tinkercad project in the works that might align with some Sustainable Development Goals somewhere down the pipe?
Thank you, Vincent. Anyone want to jump in? Great question. Thank you.
I'll try to answer that. Autodesk itself is defining a lot of goals and efforts along this line. I think to some degree, Tinkercad, I mean, we are a very small team, so we have to be a little bit choosy sometimes about what we can support. But I do know that it's coming up a lot in our conversations about the development of new lesson plans. I don't know how broadly, I mean, we're at the beginning of that process, so I think it's something that we can look at, but currently there's nothing that we have in the works specific to Tinkercad right now in the lesson plans or curriculum.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Vincent.
Well, Kellyanne, can I say something really quick about that?
Of course, Mr. Tucker.
So when the last edition of the Autodesk Make It Real, the competition, it was about sustainable housing and different like issues that come up with, and I think more so than just like Autodesk actually being the creator of some future like technology, how about like the students be the guide and the source of that? So when we started talking about it, our discussion into affordable housing, for example, took us into ways that we didn't expect. We started thinking about how do we build sustainable properties or houses for people who are poor? How do we use geothermal and solar energy and wind energy into like housing? So like before we actually started doing the Tinkercad design, starting to solve and start thinking about the ideas in terms of how they would implement any of those particular ideas or resources really became very helpful. And that conversation would have never started had it not been for the Autodesk competition. And again, because of that, it really led to a good group conversation, which led into a good design later as well, where students really were thinking much more deeply than if I were to give a lesson on geothermal energy and if I were to give about like wind energy or solar panels, because it was like genuine, real, and they were doing it for themselves. It would have been, I mean, students were researching where the closest port was based to a location where there were free land and the land that was not crappy, right? Something that, again, because it was real, to them, it really made that much more powerful and empowering for the students.
Thank you, Mr. Tassi. And it's just the way that everyone who's here is always so focused on the student and focused on, who's actually the recipient of the lesson or who's the active engager in the lesson. It's just, thank you, Mr. Tassi, for that. And also I want to say thank you to Vincent for being so brave and actively engaged. Before we move on to Dr. Cherry Rice, I just want to remind people that, we still have quite a bit of time left. If you want to ask a question out loud, it makes it a little bit more fun, I think. You raise so the lower part of your screen, hover over it, you should see an icon for a raised hand. You hit it. We thought we were being innovative by putting our computer on a lazy Susan so we could spin it around in meetings, so sorry if I'm saying. But you click the raised hand and then ask me the question in the question and answer, and we'll get your voice out there. So last but not least of our panelists, Dr. Cherry Rice has been at home working on teaching remote learning, distance learning, and also not so distance learning in her home as well with her children. So I will let you take it from there, Dr. Cherry Rice.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kellyanne. I'm going to put on my parent hat for a second because we are actually quarantined with our neighbors who we share a backyard with. So we have 6 kids underneath in our homeschool. And a few things that we found, and the age ranges are quite big. So we have everywhere from a kindergartner to a middle schooler. And then at Digital Ready, we serve high school students. So we're kind of looking at the K through 12 spectrum. And a few things that we found to be really helpful, we've kind of paired up with other folks in our neighborhood, other families. And we all jump on a Google Hangout each Monday morning, actually every single day now. And each week we launch kind of a design challenge. And I think the silver lining to all of this is that the design challenge lasts the entire week. So it allows students to go really deep in their learning. So for example, last week we launched Design Your Own Game, like design your own board game. And so on Monday, students were kind of researching and studying existing games that they had at their house. By Tuesday, they were like designing and prototyping. My kids are really obsessed with Zuba. I don't know if anybody plays that like iPad game. But then they used Tinkercad to start creating the game pieces and designed and modeled them. And we're lucky because I run Digital Ready that we have a 3D printer at home. But so we were able to print them out and actually use them in the game board design. And then by Thursday, we were kind of preparing the board game. And then on Friday, there was an opportunity to drop your games off at someone else's house in the neighborhood. And so you would play each other's games. And regardless of whether you're like in kindergarten or 6th grade, like these design challenges can be really exciting because they're short enough to like keep momentum and there's like the attention span going. If we went over a week, I could see my kids being like, oh, not this again. But there is a bit of like the social aspect too of getting to kind of share what they've created and made with other folks. It's just folks in our neighborhood at the end of the week. And I think one thing we've seen in our studio, at least, we really look at our students as co-designers in our studio. And this week we were talking with our high school students around like, what are the ways that might increase engagement as we think about virtual learning? And so some of the things that they were discussing was around the same lines with the design challenges, maybe using things like Instagram or Twitter or TikTok to post and show the progress of their projects in a more social way. Our high school students in particular, we serve mostly juniors and seniors, are really thinking about creating a digital portfolio online that they can use to apply for kind of apprenticeships, for college. Many of them are now thinking about what a gap year might look like, as higher education institutions are not sure whether they'll open. So a lot of the talk was around how might they use a tool like Tinkercad. Actually, one of our designers was talking about this, to show the design and engineering process and capture that through photos, through notes, and kind of publish in their digital portfolio these digital things, the technology that they're using and the products that they're actually creating while they're at home. And this feels super motivating to high school students, I think, in particular, because it's relevant. It's geared towards their future. So one day we're not going to be in quarantine and they can use this. And it also allows them to express their own passions and what they're really interested in a way that's meaningful for them. So that's some of the things that we were diving into this week. Hopefully those are like concrete things that we've kind of found helpful during this time.
Thank you, Sarah. Nisha, in the chat, anything or any questions that you can think of kind of based on what the participants are saying in the chat that maybe we can open up to the larger group?
I see one question. So we have a question from DF. I'm just going to use your initials. And the question is, can students see the work of other students inside Tinkercad classroom? I've seen this question a lot, that a lot of instructors want to give feedback or want students to provide feedback to other models or around privacy to make sure other students can sneak a little peek at somebody else's CAD model. So if anyone wants to answer this question, can students see the work of other students in the classroom?
I can take it. The short answer is no, but there are ways to do it. Tinkercad Classroom was really a new thing this year, and we're gonna keep putting our foot on the accelerator for development of that. It was really kind of just to get for teachers to be able to own the classroom and get students online quickly. So it's really kind of like all you need is a class code and nickname to get on there, and the students designing. It was kind of a response to teachers spending multiple classes trying to get students onboarded with creating accounts and remembering passwords, and then getting locked out and things like that. So that's what Tinkercad Classrooms is, a quick way for teachers to get students tinkering with just a link and then their nickname. The moderation, which is what we've had for several years now, is what the Google login teachers should be using. They should stick with that. We're going to make some modifications so that everybody can use Classrooms hopefully by the next school year, so that if you're a teacher, you just use Classrooms, and it doesn't matter if you're a Google teacher or if you have students with other accounts, or if you just want to use Classrooms. So we're working towards a singular solution for teachers on that. So the short answer, no. A teacher can make a student's design public in Classrooms, and then in that case, the student, she can share that with the rest of the students. We're working on some cool things where there's like a class gallery and things like that, where the student will be able to, the teacher could, have a folder where all the students can put their submission, for example, for an assignment, and then, the class, everyone can see that. So things are coming. We are a small team, and we're sort of responding a little bit to what's going on, what's happened in the past month or two. We also had some other stuff in motion. So we're going to do our best to have a more singular approach for next school year. And in the meantime, just try to make the teachers' lives easier with what we have.
Thank you, Christian. So we are all tinkering together, even at Autodesk. So thank you. Nisha, other questions? Nisha, you're muted.
When you're DJing too much in the chat room, you forget to unmute.
Awesome DJ, Nisha.
Thank you kindly. Not musically gifted, but I have the gift with the keyboard and the mouse. So I don't see any more general questions that we haven't answered, but I would like to give my 2 cents on some things I've learned over the past 2 weeks in regards to the general question of how you can maintain that hands-on physical connection with students, even though you're learning as distant. I found over the past 2 weeks, me and Kellyanne have been running this really hands-on experiment called the Tinker Together live webinars. So for about 4 hours a day, that's why I am dressed like an anime villain right now. I literally just hopped off one. I have to have the gray hair and the goggles. I had to explain myself. So I found that students are hungry for content, but the questions I'm getting from students as we're doing these webinars is that materials that And again, I always try to make sure that our programs and lessons are culturally sensitive, like Dr. Gaskins. That's why I always look to your stuff, and making sure I keep in mind not everyone has access to certain resources. Even things you think are baseline items students have in the home may not be available in the home. That is why the Make at Home collection that Wayne has so graciously included in Tinkercad, along with the Tinkercad team, thank you. For students who don't have those materials, being able to go, okay, here's a toilet paper roll, I can actually make a mock-up and still go through the process of designing. But I think you just have to put your Tinker hat on. We've had moments over the past 2 weeks that we've had students who have not been able to join us via the live webinars because of bandwidth issues, and they've requested, once we finish the webinars, if we can make a 3 to 5 minute video, so that way they don't use up any of their internet access. We've had students who have said that they don't have computer access, so they can't join us when it comes to us tinkering on Tinkercad. So that way we have to actually show a time lapse of me making the Tinkercad model and me posting it on social media, so they see a 30-second time lapse to see what I actually did and understand the gist of how I created models. We've also had several students who have told us, hey, by the way, I have my sibling needs to use this device from this time to this time because their teacher's online. Is it possible that you can do a quick post stream or have it reposted somewhere? And I know as educators, we all have different situations that we're dealing with. I'm gonna say from the past 4 to 5 weeks, we've been dealing with this issue, and past 2 weeks, we've been experimenting. The students are gonna forgive you. The students understand, even if they're going through their emotional acceptance of this situation, just like we are. I have been amazed at how flexible the students have been. I'm here with an iPad over my table. I have another iPhone I've never used that my students use to take photos. I have that over the stove because we were doing a cooking activity today, like trying to make it look like it's a live stream show, and I have a whole camera crew here. I don't. And the kids are like, Ms. Netia, you're on mute. You're on mute. The camera angle isn't working. Your thumb is over the camera. And they've just turned it into a joke. So while Dr. Cusack was saying it's a palatable stress, the kids know we're stressed out. And I'll see in the Q&A parts of our Zoom webinars that the kids are telling us, Ms. Netia, I know that your code isn't working. Maybe you should take 3 deep breaths and try again before pressing the start simulation button. Or Ms. Netia, maybe you should just get a drink of water. I can hear your voice cracking as you're trying to get through this project. I've been amazed how flexible the students have been. So while this situation may not seem so flexible and you may feel like you're missing that touch, the kids understand, and if they see you making an effort, they'll give you the benefit of the doubt. The last thing is, I don't know about privacy issues you guys may be having, but one of the issues me and Kellyanne have faced is that different school districts have different ways you can communicate with your students, different ways you can share their work, and different ways you can access their work. It's taken us a whole legal team to make sure we're not violating any policies. And you see Kellyanne shaking her head.
Thank you, Autodesk legal team.
Thank you. There were moments I wasn't gonna make it. So I was like, okay, how am I supposed to see their models? Yes, thank you, Christian. There are moments where like, how do we know if the students are following along? If we're not able to see their CAD models, if they can't send us a picture, they can't email us, they can't have social media accounts to share it, I don't have a Google Drive access, how do I know that they're doing this? And finding clever hacks, like you guys are now familiar with the hand raise thing, right? Being able to raise your hand is something I've adopted into my Zoom webinars for kids to tell me, are they okay? Using the Q&A if they're embarrassed to ask a question, to submit a question. These are ways you can make that connection with students, just like you would in the classroom when you go over a kid's shoulder and you're like, hey, do you need help with that? Or just giving them the look and monitoring that student. So those are a couple things that me and Kellyanne have discovered over the past 2 weeks. There have been moments from computer crashing to there was a storm. If you're in the New England area, there was a storm on Monday. That cut off our internet connection.
That was my birthday too.
Why did you tell me? Okay, happy belated birthday now that I'm embarrassed on this webinar, but thank you for being a trooper on that day. So those are just a couple of tips and tricks that I see people asking but are too scared to ask me for some reason. But do you guys have any other tips and tricks you've discovered in regards to that theme of connecting with students while you're not able to connect with them? Maintaining that 6 feet social distancing.
Thank you, Nisha. And maybe let's start with Sue. So maybe we'll just go around, and last week Nisha and I were late for class because we have another webinar after this. Mr. Tassi can probably write us a tardy pass though, right? So just like in a minute or so, if everybody wants to go around and just share either a last word or like a clever tip or trick, like Nisha said, using the raise hand function to poll students. Sue?
Thanks so much. I wanted to pass this to Nutrisse because she's got some very recent experiences that she's been doing in Long Beach under these circumstances. But I do appreciate, Netia, you pointing out that the kids are real resilient because teachers are very anxious about how they look. We know that they struggle with risk taking. They want to look like they really have it all together. And so I think I do two things. I pray to the stamina God just to, stay in there, hang in there. And also we are trying to share with teachers that now's the time to be a bit more forgiving with what you're moving forward. That it is not only good modeling, but it also might take a little pressure off of you to allow some more room to really have your head in the game, which is what kids really need. And the more I notice teachers being able to step back and relax a little bit, the more I notice that their ability to take risks increases the level of engagement of their students. And so there seems to be a real reciprocity in that process. So it's all connected, but it can happen, and it is happening, I think.
Thank you, Sue. Yeah, even just personally at home, our water heater broke this week. And it's not easy to get a plumber in these times. And my daughter didn't want to be on camera with her class because we weren't able to shower for a couple of days at our house. So just keeping in mind, like even, people that, like in our home, like we have, we don't need to worry about food. We don't need to worry about some of the other things that some of our students might need to worry about, but it's strange times. So, and I do agree that, the students are always forgiving and always, even if it's not so obvious, in caring about the teachers that care about them. So thank you. Nutrisse?
Yeah, so I taught a face-to-face cyborg prototyping workshop in Long Beach in late February, and now I'm teaching it via Zoom. Via Google Meet and Google Classroom. So they're using Tinkercad to do quick prototyping, and then they're using found objects to make their prototypes. Same age students, but it's a different platform, it's a different experience. And although I have the same amount of time, I'm having to change up how I did it when it was just me and the students in the classroom in Long Beach versus me on Zoom or me on Google Meet or Google Classroom and trying to deliver the same content. It's actually not possible. So I do have to make some changes and modifications. But the students, I went and peeked in my Tinkercad classroom. And so one student has his prototype done, another one has attempted it. So they're, and we're doing this in, 5 students at a time over the course of a few weeks to just really kind of give them the same experience if they missed it when I was in Long Beach. But it's way different in my approach and what I have to do and the work I have to do on the front end just to make sure that they get something out of it.
Thank you, Nutrisse. Christian?
I'm muted. Yeah, so I'm available. I'm answering tickets daily. It's interesting because I've gotten a read on how the community, our Tinkercad community, is reacting to these changing times, and I'm kind of there at the front of the line. So if anyone has any questions or concerns, just either email me or we have Tinkercad-support@autodesk.com, which Wayne and myself and Guillermo look at, and we're trying to stay on top of all that too. So we can give you some personal help if you need help there.
Thank you so much, Christian.
Yeah.
Wayne?
I just want to remind people, the making at home collection is a good new addition, but we've put a lot of content in there. The OMSI furniture parts, the Smithsonian parts. I just want to remind everybody that shape panel is a really good resource for kicking off, all kinds of different projects. And it may be a place to start, and it's accessible to everybody. So it's not like they have to load a lesson. It's not, and it's all hands-on. So it's right there. We are going to be putting more effort towards adding more content into that shape panel, and we'll be building that over the next year. So I think it's just going to be a really good place to keep an eye out. And we are going to be creating a beta program to talk to people about using some of the publishing tools that we'll be creating to build around the parts capability we already have. So I just want to get that on everybody's radar.
Thank you, Wayne. Panyan?
In terms of teaching, I started off with Zoom, and the first week was horrendous. I realized that students needed more emotional support than teaching. So from now on, I just post the videos. Everything is like posted on Google Classroom. And then our Zoom meetings are just for social emotional, checking in with each other, getting there and being there for each other. And, it's made a huge difference. It's from like having 1 to 2 people coming in for like 5 minutes into having this virtual classroom to actually having dozens and dozens of kids stay for 2.5 hours. When it's supposed to be only 1 hour. I also wanted to double up on what Dr. Sherry Rice said with the 3D printer. I'm actually looking to buy a 3D printer for myself so that I can print their designs and actually deliver it to them, because it really makes a huge change when they actually have something physical, something real, something connected to what they designed. It didn't just go into this like universe that it's never going to be seen, or so just to be acknowledged and to be printed and to be there, it actually will enhance them to like actually create even more and design even more. So
Thank you, Panyan, and just thank you for you always put your heart into your teaching and everything that you do. So just really appreciate all of your work. And last but not least, Sarah, Dr. Cherry Rice.
The last thing I was going to say is that when you're thinking about this, it really doesn't, the content can be whatever a student or the adult is most passionate about. So if it's snakes, then go with snakes. If it's like cooking, design something. If it's chess, start to make your own chessboard game. Engagement, whether you're like in the classroom or at home, when it's connected to something that you love and want to explore and you're curious about, can last a lot longer. And for parents working from home, instead of like changing things up every hour, it could mean that a student's really like engaged for like 3 or 4 hours at a time and wants to do it the next day and then the next day. And this prolongs like learning instead of like switching to new things. So, I found like things that I'm really passionate about, I'm more likely, like my kids are more likely to get passionate about. So it might be time to like pull out that, whatever. I saw my husband who's works for a software company, like using our kids to like test his new product, do like user testing, and our kids were like super into it because they were getting to like experience something that he's really passionate about. The other day we like talked about like making French macaroons and spent like hours and hours making these things in the kitchen, just as that's something I always wanted to like master. But maybe this is the time. Oftentimes we don't get that time in school because it's like 1 hour math, 1 hour ELA, 1 hour science. Now's really the time where you can embrace and like follow like where your students' passions kind of lead.
Thank you, Sarah. So we're about to sign off for now. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's here today, the panelists, the attendees. So thank you so much. If you want to continue to tinker together with us, I don't want to sound like that person, use the hashtag tinker together, but what Sarah was saying resonated with me because all week as Nisha and I have been working together, we've been educating my daughter, who's 11, and sharing some of the work that she's created as a result of Netia's excellent remote teaching and learning. So, if you want to check out the hashtag Tinker Together, or, to stay connected with us, that would be one way to do that. So thank you for now. Netia, we're late for class. Mr. Tassi, you got us, right? All right, take care, everyone. Signing off for now. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Tinkercad team, you guys are awesome. Seriously, awesome
Yes.
product. Keep it up.
Thanks.
Thank you. You guys are really awesome.